Welcome to this episode of A Facilitator's Journey. On today's episode, I'm joined by Karen Sargent. Karen is a facilitator and a coach. She works as an associate for some of the biggest UK training companies. Karen's journey, though, is fascinating about how she decided to become a facilitator. She shares with us the ups and downs of going from being an associate to trying to set up her own business, and then the decision she made to go back to being an associate. She's also very humble in sharing with us a definition of success and how she defines her success in this day. So this is your invitation to pull up a chair, get a cup of tea, and take a seat on the pink chair. You can have 2 chairs today, I've decided. Enjoy this episode. So, hey Karen, welcome to A Facilitator's Journey. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm excited about this conversation. So, Karen, first question I ask everybody is, how do we know one another?
Oh, I will never forget it because it was the first time I went to Sushi Samba. So we were both at a birthday party. And since then, I've been visiting that restaurant so many times just because it was so good.
It was very good. Actually, it was for the birthday party of a previous guest on the podcast, Caroline Boyd. It was for her birthday. So that was awesome. And Karen, help our listeners and viewers know more a bit about you. What do you do? How do you describe yourself?
So I'm an occupational psychologist and I work as a freelancer. I do a lot of leadership development and team building, and I'm also a coach.
Beautiful. And how long have you been doing this?
20 years now. Makes me feel old to say this.
That's amazing though, but to do it for 20 years, because I think it's really good for people to hear that, some of us have done this for a while and we're still alive, and there is possibility, especially where people are starting and going, how did you get here? So how did you get into this world of learning and development, freelancing?
Do you know what? I actually still remember the moment I had just finished in university and I went on a sales training course. I was working as an office administrator at the time. And I still remember sitting there fully inspired by this trainer in front of me going, that's what I want to do when I grow up. Literally. And I remember asking her, how do you get into this? And she told me, well, you need lots of experience. And so I set about every single career decision I made was because I knew I just wanted to be in front of people talking.
Amazing. Do you know who that person was? Are you still in contact with them?
Yes. Her name was Madeline Tarr. This was back in Malta, where I'm originally from. So we're no longer in contact. But I will never forget that moment of going, right, this is it. This is it.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So if you don't mind me, let's talk about it more. Like, what did you then do? Like, how did you then map out what you were going to do next?
Well, it's so weird because I had this North Star at the back of my mind, but I really had no clue how to get there. So for a few years after that, I was working in marketing. I was a brand manager, leading a team, leading a drinks brand back in Malta. But actually, I'm really glad that happened because it gave me so much knowledge and understanding of what leaders go through. So that was great. But at the back of my mind, I always had this dream of moving to London to do my master's in psychology. Because in my head, I decided that you need a master's in psychology to be able to be a trainer. I no longer kind of believe that, but that's what I thought at the time.
Okay. I love that. And so, by the way, just for anyone listening, do have a master's in psychology if you wish, because it will give you lots of information and lots of learning and in-depth knowledge. For those of you who are starting out, you don't need that as a qualification, a master's.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I've managed over 300 trainers, and some of our best trainers definitely had no training in psychology, and
Okay,
they were still amazing. So, yes.
brilliant. So you came to London, you did your master's in
Mm.
psychology. Then what happened?
So then my first job. So actually, first I had to go back to Malta. At the time, Malta wasn't part of the EU. So I went back to Malta and worked as an internal psychologist there. But my eye was always back on London. And I
Mm.
still remember the day Malta had a referendum to decide whether we would join the EU or not. And the vote was yes. And after I came back from partying, I literally went on the British Psychological Society website, found a job for the BBC as a psychologist, applied, flew twice for an interview,
Did you get
got
it?
the job. Yeah, got the job, and that's it. That's how I moved to London, and I've been here ever since.
Do you know what? That says to me it was all meant to happen. Like it just
Yeah,
feels like, wow, this feels like a bit of a
yeah.
fairy tale conversation. This is cool. I'm liking this. Okay.
I, it's so
Uh,
lovely to
it's
remember.
lovely. This is cool. When did you leave? Like, when did you, oh no, what helped you decide to
Mm,
leave the safety of
yeah,
corporate life and go
yeah.
freelance? What happened there?
Yeah, so actually, before I answer that, I just want to clarify that I've been doing this for 20 years, but I've been self-employed for 12
Okay,
now.
that's still
So that
quite
20
double
years
digit.
includes that. So I still remember. So after I worked at the BBC, then I started working as a consultant. I was still employed, and I started to feel quite disillusioned by employment.
Mm,
And I remember just having a bit of a crisis when I was 30, going, oh my goodness, I thought I was really clear about my purpose, but I'm really unhappy. And at the
mm.
time, I had just joined a training company, a big training company here in the UK, and I was the coaches manager there, the head of coaching. So on paper, literally, it was my dream come true. couldn't I couldn't have wished for more. I'm working for a company that I always wanted to work for. I'm, in a senior position. I'm trusted. But my goodness, I was so close to burnout, and I still remember every day like it was a struggle to get out of bed.
Oh my
I
gosh.
Yeah, I was so close. I was really, really close to burnout, which is why today I'm so passionate about well-being. And I had always had the dream to be self-employed, but I was always really scared.
Mm.
I was like, you know what? I'm scared of being poor.
Hmm.
Was the the statement I'd always say. I'm really scared of being poor. So my experience there was so bad that at the time, my then boyfriend, who's now my husband, we had these savings, and we knew kind of our relationship was serious, and we were like, oh, shall we buy a place together, or shall we go traveling? And we were like, we're going traveling. So so we took all our savings and went traveling for 18 months.
Yeah.
We lived on a very small budget, so now I was poor, but I was free and I was incredibly happy. And for 18 months, we just traveled the world around Asia. We actually got to Asia without using planes. It was the adventure of a lifetime. And I still remember that feeling of freedom. And both of us at the end of our trip were thinking about, we went to this ashram for a week to really reflect on our trip. And both of us were thinking, the most important thing that we got from this is this sense of freedom.
Mm.
And I really want to hold on to it. And so I made a promise to myself that I would not be employed again. I would always be self-employed after this trip. And I remember coming back thinking, I'd rather be poor, but I'm free. So I was willing to face that fear.
Yeah.
And I still remember coming back and I saw a job for a senior psychologist with Emirates in Dubai. I was like, oh my goodness, this looks interesting. And I filled the application. but my heart sank. And it was almost like my soul was saying, hey, you made me a promise. You need to keep it. So I didn't send that application. And I'm like, right, I'm going to give this a shot. I have plan A, which is to be a freelancer. I have plan B, which is to go and work in bars and in a supermarket, whatever, do anything to just pay my rent until I earn enough money. My husband, Paul, at the time, started a travel blog, which is not exactly a money-making machine either. So actually, there was a lot of pressure on me to kind of make it work. And we're moving to the most expensive city, in the UK. But travel does something to you. It kind of frees you from a lot of fear. So we're like, we'll figure it out. We'll find a way. And so I approached the company that I used to work for, and they have a network of 200-300 facilitators and associates. And so I joined the facilitator network, and I kind of started getting enough work from them to cover my living costs, and it started from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. I just want to go back on the fear thing. So people listening to this, some people might be thinking, oh, I do want to go and work for myself. I do want to be a freelancer. I do want to go and become, like, follow my dream of coach, facilitator, trainer, but I'm scared of the money. And I thank you for acknowledging so openly, like, that is a real fear. Like, I'm going to be poor. I can't make any money. No one's going to want me. And something that I've learned over time is doing your own inner work. So if someone said to me, before you leave corporate and become an associate for us, please, can you go and get some coaching and work on your limiting beliefs? Because those limiting beliefs will become very loud for you when you start working for yourself, and will show up in ways that you won't expect. And it was really good advice. And I didn't really understand what they were saying at the time, but I did it because I was like, I knew I was leaving the corporate world. I was leaving Diageo by my choice, rather than I didn't want to be there. But it was like, I didn't quite understand what they meant. So I did the work, and I still do the work, as you probably still do your inner work, because these limiting beliefs have a funny old way of popping up, don't they? Like, you could be in the middle of a workshop, someone says something, or someone looks at you in a certain way, and you're like, oh God, oh my life. And then running the business itself, when you're writing proposals, you're pricing yourself, you're pricing your work, you're pricing your projects, rejection, like people say no, like they don't want you to run a project for them. Like, that's when all the limiting beliefs appear. So it's great that you said that, you looked at it, you faced your fear, and you jumped anywhere. And I love your plan B. That was always my plan B. Always, always. We say in the UK, oh, I'll go and work at Tesco. That's one of our big retailers. I'll go and work at Tesco. I'll stack shelves. Have you ever been close to going to work in a bar or stack shelves?
No, ever.
Nope. Same here.
Not even close.
I love that. So you went back to work as an associate. So for people who are listening to this who maybe aren't British, an associate is when you work for another training company and you're the freelancer. So you don't necessarily have the direct relationship with the client, but you go and run the workshops, or you are brought in as the coach for that. Is that how you did it? Yeah. How long were you an associate for?
I still am.
But there was a little bit in between though, wasn't there?
So I never stopped being an associate.
Aha.
But when COVID hit, well, actually, as an associate, my plan and my thinking, and actually my limiting belief, was that success really meant me having my own clients. So to me, being an associate was almost like a stopgap, because I can't get my own clients. And I saw that as a lesser achievement. So I always saw being an associate that as I wasn't successful enough. And so throughout being an associate, I've always been thinking and trying to build my own business. And I kind of happened to fall into the kind of circle or training about digital marketing. And I got really interested in digital marketing. I did a ton of courses in digital marketing. And so when COVID happened, and I had a lot more time on my hands. I mean, it's interesting. I think you said, were you ever close to having to go work in a bar? The first 2 weeks of lockdown, COVID, were probably the scariest time of my career, because suddenly we had literally just come back from traveling once again. We tend to take winter off and go somewhere warm. So we'd come back, and a week later, lockdown happened, and all my work got cancelled. And we've
Wow.
just spent our savings on travel. So that was a really scary
Okay,
time.
that sounds really super scary.
Yeah. What happened though was within 2 weeks, people were really good at shifting
Yeah.
and moving online. And luckily, one of the companies I freelance for, had already had virtual training. So they could pivot
Yeah.
so quickly. So within 2 weeks, it actually turned out to be much better for me, because I could still earn the same amount of money, but in less time, because there was no travel.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. So I had a lot of time kind of to spare. And I also, once the first kind of lockdown shifted, I could go back to Malta. So I moved there for 3 months because my dad was ill at the time. I really
Uh-huh.
wanted there. So I started taking less work. But I had this time on my hands, and I said, right, I'm going to finally create my own course and sell it. And kind of the training is all about kind of, you pick one thing, right? And you focus on one thing, you find a niche and one skill. And I thought, camera confidence is so important at the moment. Everyone is on video, have to talk to the camera. So I created a course on that, a coaching course. It was kind of a mix of coaching. And I did it for 6 months. I launched 3 courses. So the first one, I got about 8 people in. The second one, I sold 12 people in. The third one, I was really close to burning out once again, because I had to post videos every day and go on social media every day. And I couldn't do it. And so I just decided to use Facebook ads. They didn't work. And so what I realized was, I was spending all this money, all this time, all this energy. And I realized, my goodness, being an associate is so much easier. And it's also less risky,
Yeah.
because the beauty of being an associate is you have zero costs. Literally, my business costs nothing. So if
Yeah.
I'm not earning money, at least I'm not having to pay
Yeah.
anything. So that's when the penny started to drop. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I can just run my own workshops for big organizations.
Yeah.
So I started focusing on that. And I remember I paid an agency £5,000 to get me appointments. So to get me on the phone with people. And I just really hated that. I found
Did it
myself, first of
work?
all, no, not at all.
They
I
didn't get
spent
you any
hours.
appointments.
They got me appointments, but they didn't lead to work. Because actually, getting a call is what I've learned now. With hindsight is such a beautiful teacher. And actually, anyone thinking of doing this, I think this is a really...
Please, do you mind sharing what you learned, or what
Yes, oh,
happened?
absolutely.
Thank you.
So basically, the whole system, and I thought this was going to be great, because you are guaranteed a number of appointments with the money that you invest. So I think it was 4 or 5 appointments a month for 3 months. The thing is that, first of all, in order for those calls to be fruitful, you have to be so clear about what you're offering and what the problem is, so that the calls that you do get are people who are ready and in need of a solution. So that's the first mistake I made. I still have this brochure of 7 different things that I could offer and 12 different subjects of workshops. I just put it all in there, and I would just, through a conversation, find out what was needed. So that was my first mistake. My second mistake is I have no sales skills. So I have no idea how to uh, engineer the conversation and also follow up and be patient and follow up again and again, because ultimately that's what creates the sale. And that was, I think, the turning point for me.
Mm.
Because once again, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm investing a lot of money and a lot of time doing things I don't enjoy, when showing up, running a workshop is what makes me happy, what makes me
Yeah.
feel alive. I'll just do that.
Mm. So I've never paid someone to do those sales leads. Thank you for sharing that, because I was always curious
Mm.
what happened. Were the people who they gave you as a lead, were they interested in what you had to offer, do you think? Or were they quality leads?
Well, I really want to be careful not to blame the lead, because I think that was just one part
Yeah.
of the problem. I think there was also an issue with me, my in terms of how I was marketing myself, what I was focusing on. Clarity of my offer was really missing. My lack of follow up. So there was quite a lot of that. I
Okay.
mean, I did get to speak to a few senior people, but sometimes they'd be like, oh, maybe we'll talk to HR.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting.
I'm
So
not sure.
it sounds like, though, if you're going to invest in using someone to do some outreach work to like get your introduction calls, to
Mm,
get calls, is be really clear on what it is you're offering. So what is the
yeah,
niche that you're working in?
yeah.
Um, and it's interesting, you said you weren't too sure how to engineer the conversations or do the follow-up. So
Mm,
there is a process, there is a way of
yeah,
talking to potential clients, and how you then follow up and bring it alive. So that's definitely a learnt skill as well.
yeah,
um and there is a mindset as well that I think is needed. There's a bit of
yeah,
tenacity, like
yeah.
there's a robustness, resilience.
Mm,
um and that's just one way of finding clients, isn't it? Because then we've also got, you can use the social media element. So like you said as well, like
mm,
there were, when you were doing the open classes, it's being
mm,
online, being visible in the space of
yeah.
LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook,
Hmm.
which are that's what we're told to do, and that is true. But I think it also needs to be backed with a good newsletter list, like your own email
Mm,
list as well,
yeah.
because I know that's where I make the most sales, is when we send out the emails
Hmm.
saying about
Yeah.
classes and workshops. It isn't when I post about it online. That's just like a
Mm,
shop window. That's just to remind people this is what
yeah.
we do.
Absolutely. And I do think that the most important quality to be able to build a business in that way is consistency,
Yeah.
is being able to show up again and again and again. And one of the things that takes away so much energy from me is having to do something that I don't feel like doing.
It's true for
And so,
everybody, Karen. I think that's true for
but
everybody.
true, true. So consistency is definitely not a
Yes.
strength of mine. And also, it is paralyzing for me. And it was taking away all this energy that I need when I run workshops and show up with groups.
Yeah.
So again, if I had to go and talk to my maybe, my younger self who got into this whole idea of building an online business and this is the way to go, I'd be like, well, really think about what you want from your working life.
Mm.
And if you're ready to create content every day without any return, because the first 3 months you won't get anything in return. And if you are kind of happy to persevere, then go for it. But if not, just don't waste your time.
Yeah.
I feel like I've wasted so much time creating
Really?
stuff. Mm, yeah. I was cleaning up my drive the other day about a year ago now. I was cleaning up the Google Drive, and I found so many things I created. I love creating stuff. Like I just love making stuff like cheat sheets and top tips and quizzes and stuff like that. And I have so many of them that I just put together. I'll spend a week working on them, really excited, and then I'll do nothing with them because I can't be bothered to post about them on LinkedIn or social media. And that was a real wake up call for me, seeing all the work I've done. That's the bit that I enjoy, but actually also seeing that I did nothing with it.
And you don't think you can do anything with it now?
I think part of me just doesn't want to. I don't want to feel like I have to
Yeah, fair enough.
post every
Yeah.
day. I've been really, and I think one thing that shifted, and I think this comes with age as well. I've always been pushing for more. I want to achieve more. What's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's the next thing? What's the
Yeah.
next thing? And I still remember someone telling me, look, whatever you think you're going to find at the top of that mountain, it's not going to be there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah, so true, isn't it? Now
exactly.
you're just saying it. I'm like going, yeah. Like, what do I expect to find by pushing myself?
Yeah. Why am I doing this? And I think losing my dad as well a couple of years ago kind of just helps you see life and what life is really about.
Yeah, perspective.
And so now I really know how much I need to earn every month to live a good life. And once I've hit that target, that's it.
Wow.
So for example, this year I've taken so many more holidays because I'm like, oh, brilliant. I've got my work booked in for those 3 weeks. I don't need to work that week. I'm going on holiday. And it has been a magical year for me. And I'm like, yeah, this is what life's about. Not having more money in the bank.
Let's, if you don't mind, can we talk about, I think you talk about the what success is to us. And it's a conversation that I have with quite a few people on a regular basis, including just sort of myself. And you voice something and it's really struck me, actually. I can feel very emotional. It's like, your first thought was like being successful is having your own clients. And I think probably that's a truth for me as well, because I've been really thinking about this. Is like when I was an associate, my goal for the year, work 100 days. That's all I did. I worked 100 days. And I was always paid well as an associate, about £1,100 a day. So you can do the maths. I earned over 100K.
Yeah.
And I did so much sailing in that time and racing, and I was all over the world. And since I've been running the business as me, having my own clients, my sailing's dropped off. I have way fewer holidays. It's definitely emotionally and mentally draining. It's way harder. Like working for myself. And there's part of me going, even now, like the last few months, I've been going, do I want to carry on the model as it is? Like, is this working for me? And there is like at the moment, it's still a very loud voice that's saying, no, you've got to carry on like this, because this is success. This is what it needs to be. But then there's another small voice, and I wonder if she's going to get louder. It's like, yeah, but you could go and work with some very cool people that you know now who will trust you and entrust their clients to you. Why not do that? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
God, you've really got me thinking. This is why I do the
dear.
podcast. No, it's a good thing, Karen. No, Karen, it's a really good thing. By the way, if you're listening to this, I'm not about to close down School of Facilitation, but I might rework the model. But that's the joy of working for ourselves as well, isn't it, Karen? Yeah. It's like we can reframe what's important to us. We reframe how we work and how we do things. Like
absolutely. That's the joy.
Yeah. Isn't the definition of madness doing the same thing over and over again? So, sort of given to Einstein. So yeah. So is it mad to keep doing the same thing every year over and over and over again? I don't know. It's got me really thinking. Well, so what's your definition of success now? Like, how do you define success now?
So for me, success is more of a feeling rather than a having, right? So
Hmm.
feeling content, feeling at peace, feeling present, feeling free, being able to go away on holiday or to a festival and completely switch off without any worries or any thoughts about work. Of course, kind of you need a basic amount of income
Hmm.
to be able to do that. So there's an element of earning enough not to have to worry about money, but that doesn't need to be millions, right? It doesn't need to be millions at all. So that's what success is to me, is just
Nice.
being able to be present in the moment and make the most out of this life, this one
Brilliant.
life that we have.
Oh, I love that. Sort of same and different topic going that way.
Mm,
You said like you get really clear on like the money that you need in a year. Have
yeah.
you got an equation that you use, or have you got a thought process that you could articulate for people to hear?
So I have a target amount,
Okay.
and that target amount, basically, I've got my basics, which
Yes.
mean I pay my mortgage, I food, living
Hmm.
expenses. So that's my salary. And then there's also, I've got an amount to invest in my pension,
Yeah.
an amount to save for holiday. I make sure I save at least 1 month's um, uh, living
Yeah.
expenses so that I can take a month off in full. I also save up for travel,
Yeah.
and I also have an emergency fund. So that's my equation, really,
Brilliant.
because there's no costs. It's whatever I earn is mine rather than like what used to happen before,
Yeah.
paying Facebook ads, paying the agency, paying VAs, and all of that.
Nice. I like that. It's very simple and it's a bottom up approach. Can we just, for full disclosure, do you have children? Do you have any pets?
No. So actually, I don't have kids, and it was a decision we made after traveling, and again, it was one of those things of us wanting to hang on to our freedom.
Mm.
So it was a really hard decision because I always grew up imagining I would have kids,
Yeah, me too.
always.
Me too.
But when I stopped and I really thought about it, and especially seeing my friends have children, I just didn't want that life. It did not appeal to me. And I guess I'm lucky in that I never got broody, because I think if you get broody, then all sense goes, all
Apparently,
rationalizing goes out of the window.
apparently. So,
Apparently.
Karen, those listening, I don't have children either. And I actually had to check in with my girlfriends. I think I was like in my late 30s, and I said to them, how do you know you want children? And like some of them were like, oh, you just get this feeling, Kirsty. And I knew I needed 2 children by the time I was 35. And I was like, what?
Oh.
And they were like, yeah, and they were like trying to describe it to me. And I was like,
No.
nah, no. And it isn't just, dear listener, it's not that I don't like children, because I like other people's children, and I'm very good. For some of you listening who are my friends, I'd like to hope that you'll vote on this one, that I'm good with the kids, and I'm good that I can give them back as well. But no, I've never been keen. So it's good to it's nice to meet someone else who doesn't have children, because I sometimes feel it's the minority, and I do get it affords me a
Yeah.
freedom that people with children don't have. I know that my decision making is for me, and I don't have to consider another person and their needs. And also it has an impact, I think, financially as well, because the
Extremely.
cost of cost of bringing up another human being, I absolutely get that. So going back to Karen's financial model, if you have children, you need to add them in, by the way. And then the
Absolutely.
other thing I always say to people is, when you have a partner or a husband, you need to be talking to them as well about the finances, especially if you're choosing to go freelance. And I'm sure you
Hmm.
do this, all of you, and I'm sure you would think about doing that. But there will be a point where you maybe leave the corporate world, and there can be up to 6 months where your income will be really low versus where you were.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give someone who's
Mm,
thinking about this and works in the corporate world
yes.
is work very hard to build contacts, to
Yes.
build relationships, to get known,
Hmm.
because without that, you will struggle. So, right
Yes.
now, I work with 3 companies that give me work,
Hmm.
and they are all, they all came from previous relationships,
Yeah.
from previous connections I had.
Yeah.
And it wasn't kind of straightforward. So someone was an associate and then got a job and invited me in. Someone else started her own business, but they're all based on past relationships. And the one
Absolutely.
thing I really wish I'd done is made more of an effort to build my network before I jumped into this. Without a
Ah,
network, you will struggle.
yeah. That's a really, really valid point.
Mm.
So how can people, let's help our listeners. Maybe some people are
Mhm.
sitting there going, but I really do want to build a network, and I'm really trying, and I'm going on LinkedIn every day. Like,
Mm.
I mean, I left corporate as LinkedIn was only like in its infancy. Like, I didn't,
Yeah.
2006, August, I joined LinkedIn. I think I must have been an early
Wow.
adopter, she says smugly. So how do we build network in this day and age, and a meaningful network? I think that's the other thing,
Mm.
a meaningful
Mm.
network.
So actually, what I would say is don't focus on LinkedIn. Focus on face-to-face relationships. Meet people face to face, and just be interested in getting to know people. Create a connection. The people that now give me work, I never built a relationship with them knowing that they would be giving me work. At the time, they
No.
were employees of other companies. So for me, it's much more about building relationships face to face, building a connection, finding what you've got in common, and keeping in touch.
Yeah. And it's
It sounds really
authentic,
simple.
and
Yes,
it's being
yes.
authentic, because it's really I now look back to when I left Diageo, and suddenly all these people are like, oh, do you want to have a coffee? Do you want to have a catch up? And I am your classic extrovert. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that's cool. And it soon became really apparent that all they wanted to know was my contact list, my little black book, who
Mm.
at Diageo could they talk to? And I was like, oh, you don't want to talk to me for
Yeah,
me. You want to talk to me for
exactly.
who I know.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one thing I noticed. But then, so that felt inauthentic. That's what the point is. It was
Yes.
inauthentic connection. Whereas there are people that I have known for years from Diageo, and there is a really great connection that, for example, I was at the airport on Monday, and suddenly one of my old colleagues came racing over to me, gave me a massive hug, and we hadn't seen each other in person for a good 5 years. And it was great. Like, we had a catch up. It was like we were reconnecting, because the connection was there already and it was authentic. And then there was like, let's catch up, let's talk, let's see what's going on in each other's worlds. And
Yeah.
I do that because, not because I think anything's going to happen from
Hmm.
a business perspective or a financial perspective, but I do it because there is friendship there. But I also know it's being front of mind. So a lot of people say
Yes.
to me, oh, we see you, Kirsty, on LinkedIn all the time. I'm like, I'm not on it all the
Mm.
time, but they think I am. But I'm front of mind, so that when they
Yes.
have a need for a facilitator, or they have a need for someone to help them do some learning design, I potentially come up in their head, so that at
Hmm.
least they reach out and say, can I have a conversation?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that, I think, is about being front of mind. Other things people can do to make connections, though, so they can build their networks before they leave the corporate world. Yes, they can
Hmm.
use LinkedIn. Yes, you can use Instagram. Um, there's lots of communities now, so finding the communities of practice where you want to be hanging out, I think, is super helpful as well. So joining networks as a facilitator and a trainer, there's There's School of
Yeah,
Facilitation, there's the POD, there's the IAF, which is the International Association of Facilitators. There's probably in your local neighborhood, if you're in there's often practices like learning and development groups. So it is worth having a dig around, I think.
absolutely. Yeah. And also, I mean, one of the things that really helped me was to actually work with a training company. That's what made it easier for me.
Yeah.
Is that actually I was so known in that organization that I was front of mind for many people and I was trusted by them.
On that, so some people might go, they would like to be an associate and they'd like to work
Mhm.
for different training companies. What advice can you give people on how to find companies who are looking to recruit at this time?
Hmm. It's a really hard question to answer because, especially this year, I mean, things are really slow this year for training companies in general.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure you would find a lot of adverts. But
Yeah.
one of the things I've done in the past is if a friend of mine has attended a really good workshop,
Mm.
I'd ask them who delivered it, and then I'd get in touch with the company and see if they work with freelancers. So that's one kind of
Yeah.
slightly non-obvious way of doing it.
Yeah.
So all of us have friends in the corporate world and attend training, just find out who they're impressed by and see
Yeah.
if they need anyone.
That's a good point. I think
Um,
so. If you're listening to this, this was recorded in July 2024. And I've noticed it as well, Karen, that business feels different this year. It feels slower. Actually, it's the 5th of July. So in the UK, we've just got a new government today. I hold judgment. I have no idea. I think, anyway, I'm not apolitical. It's not a political podcast, but let's just hope things shift and move, because I do think there's been some stagnant business behavior based on the politics of our time, as well as the economics, as well as the cost of living and all of
mm,
the above. So I think you're right that training agencies are not proactively hiring associates.
mm,
I've heard the same thing. And it's a challenge. It's hard. And I sort of say to people who are going, I'm thinking of leaving corporate, is like, leave when you have a plan. Leave when you
yeah,
have the potential for some work, or leave
absolutely.
with redundancy.
That's the ideal. That is the ideal.
But it sounds like you didn't leave with redundancy, because I
No,
didn't. I didn't either.
no.
I just
I
resigned.
literally, and then spent all my savings traveling.
I love that. Oh, that was brilliant. Oh my God. But I had done the travel bit, and then for 6 months, and started at 30, so similar to yourself,
Mm,
and then came back, couldn't get the job that I wanted in Diageo, and then realized my dream job had come up for I could apply, and I actually got it. So it was a capability role in the global sales team.
mm.
So that's where I then learned all my craft, and I didn't realize it was the beginning of the end of my time in the corporate world. So I spent 2.5
Wow.
years doing that, and then resigned. It was great.
Oh,
Now I realize that.
would you ever
Anyway,
go back?
no, I've had this
Never.
conversation that I would be rogue. Any friends listening to this who do work in corporate who know me well, like, I've sometimes thought, oh, maybe I'll apply for head of capability or like one of the big roles, and then my brain just goes, my God,
Uh-uh.
you'd have to be in an office and you wouldn't be able to choose your hours, and you'd challenge everything. I think you'd be a right pain in the backside. I don't know. Maybe I'll be
Yep.
fine. Would you ever go back?
No, never. Never.
Yeah.
No way.
It's good, isn't it? So at the end of the podcast, I always do quick fire questions, Karen. So I'd like to
Okay.
ask you 4 questions. Okay. Number 1, what advice would you give someone starting out as a facilitator or trainer?
Create an emergency fund so that you've got peace of mind.
Mm. How much is an emergency? Oh, Each
3
of us is
months.
different. 3 months. Thank
3
you.
months living expenses.
I love that. Who do you follow in social media land that you think others should too?
Adam Grant.
Yeah, he's interesting, isn't he?
Brené Brown. Andrew Huberman. And if you are in your late 40s, Dr. Marie Claire on Instagram. She talks about menopause, which is such an important topic.
I'll go and find her. What book or podcast do you like to recommend to people?
This is an old book, but it's a book that had such a profound impact on me that I always try to gift it. And it's The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. And I think as a facilitator, you talked about things being amplified, like our limiting beliefs. You know, we have so much internal judgment of who we are, and we're constantly criticizing ourselves. And that was a book that really set me free.
Oh, I love that. And then the final question. How have you invested in yourself or your business to support you in moving forward?
I love learning. So actually this year I've trained as an integral coach. I got trained up years ago as a coach, but integral coaching is a little bit more holistic, which I love. And I'm literally at the moment going through the neuroscience of change kind of set of workshops. So I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly reading because I love it.
And I love the fact that you said the way you've invested in yourself is to go and do more learning for yourself and paying for that. And I think it's so important that if we're in the world of learning and development, that we are developing and learning. Otherwise it feels incredibly hypocritical that we're just, no, I'm fine. I've got it now. I just go off and charge people lots of money and hey, I can just do it. But it walks the talk. Karen, thank you so much for this juicy conversation today. It's been so much fun. Thank you for sharing your story with us and your insights and your pearls of wisdom.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
That was a really interesting conversation again with Karen. Like, chat really made me stop and think about my definition of success. For years, as I said, like my definition of success, work 100 days, do loads of sailing, do loads of sport. And then when I've had my own clients, whilst it is about the money, I then feel like if I was to go back to being an associate, that I've somehow failed myself and that I haven't been success. So it's really this conversation has made me pause and think, like, what is it? Or why is it I do what I do? And I think it goes back to values and looking at what are the values that I think are important and relevant for me, and how do those then relate to what I choose to do in the business. I wonder if that has had an effect on any of you listening as well and watching, like, what are my values and therefore how do I define my success as well? It's brilliant. Now, a bit of a public service announcement. If you've ever thought, I'd like to stay a bit more connected to School of Facilitation, other than the podcast, there is the monthly pod. So the monthly pod is on the first Friday of the month. It is a Zoom call, so it's live. We meet for an hour. It's free as well, so it's another way of gaining connection with the community. You can find more details on the website under Community Pod. We have multiple guests who come and do talks. Everything is still very much focused on us as the facilitator and the trainer. It happens between 9 and 10 UK time on the first Friday. But if you just head over to the website right now, you can sign up and you'll get an invite and a link. And I'd love to see you there. So thank you for being with me on this podcast today. It will be great to see you again in a couple of weeks, and go well.